Welcome to a special episode of You Can't Laugh at That, the podcast where we take topic. Well, yeah, you know the rest, but this is our celebration of 50 official episodes, and we just wanted to take this opportunity to look back on what we've learned over 50 plus episodes. Also, we want to thank you for listening to this podcast and inspiring us to continue to make more episodes. We've got so many things that we've yet to talk about, and we're so excited to share with you all the ways that you can laugh at that.
It's okay to make yourself the butt of the joke. Like, you can talk about the topic, but if you make yourself the butt of the joke, it makes it okay.
Do you mean to knock your camera?
No.
There we go.
Were you looking at my dick?
Yeah,
you were crotch shotting us, and it was very uncomfortable. Yeah. Hey, man, you don't work for the New Yorker. Stop it.
Starting this, I didn't know what to expect. I mean, we recorded the first episode without knowing for sure if You Can't Laugh at That was the name of this. It was just that whole thing. It was just like, just do it. Just do it. And if it works, it works. If not, you've done it and you know.
That's my approach creatively most of the time, is shoot first and ask questions later.
Right. And that's a good mantra to have when it comes to telling a joke too. It's just like, just get up and do it. It's either going to work or it's going to need work. So, and you're not going to know that until you do it.
We should clarify now that we're here, all of us sitting here. I don't actually edit the podcast. David edits the podcast.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I just record it.
I don't know why I keep because I know David's mentioned that numerous times.
It's fine. It's fine. We'll just tell people, because if the editing's bad, then it's, Jeremy, fucking asshole.
Yeah. No, totally.
That lazy. Golden Ox Studio's terrible.
No, you do a good job. I just don't want to take credit for work that isn't mine.
You can't laugh at that.
Welcome to You Can't Laugh at That, the podcast where we take topics you can't laugh at. We find ways to laugh at them in the never-ending quest to prove that anything can be funny. With me today is Steve Mers. Steve Mers, what's up?
Hi.
Gheramy Demery is joining us here live from Studio B. Studio B, what's going on up there?
Habitually sad all the time.
Are you?
Yeah, I'm a depressed individual constantly. I put on like a smiley face, but in reality, I'm fucking dying inside.
You ever try taking a walk?
Yeah.
What about my body type has ever made you think I walked anywhere?
I'm ginger.
I'm an artist, goddammit.
Oh, dude, it's been tough, man. I will say this is the first year where I've really kind of got into depressive states a few times. Yeah, and I
for me,
but now we have something to celebrate, and that's 50 episodes of this podcast that we're podcasting.
We have found 50 things you can laugh at.
Yeah.
And one of them hasn't been depression yet. We haven't had an episode about that. I'm kind of glad that we haven't gotten into the real dark. I mean, the deep stuff. I mean, although episode 9 is suicide or whatever, but still.
I don't know. We went pretty hard, pretty quick, and then we dialed it back some.
Yeah. You can't blow through all those topics.
Yeah.
I mean, we had Dwayne Duke on, and we talked about strip clubs, and it's just the whole idea of this podcast is to prove that anything can be funny. And so, you can look at something like strip clubs, and it's well, no shit, they're funny. There's a lot of funny things that happen, but we've heard so many different jokes about strip clubs, and it's a lot of the same over and over again. And then just getting that perspective from Dwayne, who is a gay man, going to straight strip clubs, it's just another perspective on it. Every comedian has their own take on something unless they take someone else's jokes,
right?
Because everybody has their own experience of
they either have their own take or they take.
Yeah, they take someone's take.
I'm a joker, I'm a smoker, I'm a midnight toker, but I've never taken anything in my life.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good place to start.
What, confronting me on
yeah. Have you? What jokes have you stolen, Jeremy? You're riding this success wave off of other people's material.
Look, man, I can't even spell plagiarism.
Play.
Plagiarismo.
No, this is first and foremost, I want to thank you guys for being part of this. This has been a rewarding learning experience. I've learned so much doing this podcast.
You're quite welcome, David.
So
Thank you for having us.
What made you, just out of curiosity, because I don't know if we've ever had this conversation. Like, Steve, I remember I approached you at LVT and I was like, hey, I have this idea for a podcast. Would you want to do it? And you were like, didn't even ask questions. You were like, yep. Like, what was it that made you interested in doing this?
I like doing podcasts. I've always liked doing talk radio. So
yeah, you do have that background.
And I can't, even though we weren't in the pandemic already, I don't know. Oh, one big thing was I can curse, even though you notice I don't really curse on our podcast because I'm so used to not being allowed to curse. And I don't know.
As soon as the podcast ends, you're like, fuck, I forgot to curse.
Yeah. Fucking A, man.
Well, yeah. And that's the thing too, is like, when I'm on stage, I don't curse. Like, I'll drop an F-bomb every once in a while, but in the podcast, this is how I talk as a person, just in a conversational setting. So
I hate that comic that does the like, and I was like, fucking fuck. And it's like, no, man, you're not.
Yeah,
You're not cool or funny when you do that.
Right. Use words strategically.
Right. Word economy.
Right.
You get 5 fucks and they better be good.
Yep. You can only give 5 fucks.
Yeah.
You get 5.
The amount of fucks to give.
I used 2 of Tuesday's fucks. Now I only get 3 on Tuesday.
I keep a tally. I keep a running quota. I have a fuck budget.
Fuck budget.
How funny would it be if there were comedy clubs like that where you're like, you can say fuck once a minute, but that's it.
Yeah. Once a minute.
Yeah. Once a minute, you can say fuck, but that's it. That's all you get.
Sending chills down Brian Regan's spine.
Yeah.
Fuck. Wonder how much he curses in real life.
He does many times.
I feel like I curse more in regular life than I do doing stand-up.
Yeah.
By a long shot.
Yeah, it's a waste of space. It's a waste of time when you're on stage and you're devoting I
just don't ever want a joke to revolve around the curse word. Like, if I ever were put in a position where I had to go clean, I know that those jokes are still going to stand and stand strongly. And that's, I don't have anything against cursing, especially in comedy, but the joke can't be the curse word.
And that takes us to episode 2, curse word, the curse words by Dave Flint. He was our first guest on this show. Dave Flint was, and he didn't run the light. We had a pretty
yet another beauty of podcasting. There is no light.
Yeah. Starting this, I didn't know what to expect. I mean, we recorded the first episode without knowing for sure if You Can't Laugh at That was the name of this. It was just that whole thing. It was just like, just do it. And if it works, it works. If not, you've done it and you know. I've been thinking about doing this for so long
that's my approach creatively most of the time, is shoot first and ask questions later.
Right. And that's a good mantra to have when it comes to telling a joke too. It's just like, just get up and do it. It's either going to work or it's going to need work. So, and you're not going to know that until you do it.
It's great phrasing.
Yeah.
This is like getting producer notes in real time. Yeah, I like that.
That's
phrasing.
what this episode is. Just doing this virtually has been an experience too. It was such an easy transition. I just bought a mic and here we are.
Yeah, we pivoted quickly. We really did. And I was really pumped about that because I was worried that, with the studio and everything, that I was going to lose a bunch of podcasts, or a lot of podcasts were going to be shelved for the time being and most of them wouldn't come back, or they wouldn't be worth coming back to, and etc. But I only lost in the pandy I only lost maybe one podcast.
Really?
Yeah, and I've been growing the list of podcasts since then. So I think it's really encouraging that, this podcast in particular was definitely helpful for me to show proof of concept, and you guys allowed me the freedom to do that and believed in me that I would be able to figure that out. So I really do appreciate it.
Well, yeah, of course. You're our friend. But also, just what you're doing is you're giving so many people a platform and the ability to get their message out there. And the fact that you pivoted quickly, too. I mean, I don't even remember the conversation where it was like, are we going to do this virtually or not? It was like, let's try it. Let's, it's either going to work or it's not. And it's given us the ability to reach out to comics from all over the place, just really insightful people. Like, I feel like if the pandemic didn't happen, we wouldn't have gotten comics like Greg Stone, we were getting comics from Cincinnati, Rand Barnacle, Blake Hammond, Zach Wyckoff. Like, there's a lot. Joe Bates from Indianapolis, Jasmine's in LA. We're even interviewing local comics on from a virtual setting too. But I mean, this just goes to show you that some bullshit can happen, and it's just like what you do about it determines what happens next.
Yeah. And that's why I'm glad we pivoted the way we did, because it did help us expand where people are from. They didn't have to come here to necessarily be on the podcast, which is nice.
Right. You can do it from wherever. Just have a decent Wi-Fi connection and we're good. Mm-hmm. And that brings us to Golden Ox Studio. You're thinking about starting a podcast, or I don't know, are you still doing streams?
Yeah, live streaming. Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about Golden Ox Studio, Jeremy. How can Golden Ox Studio help our listeners in the middle of a pandemic?
Dude, go to goldenoxstudio.com and leave me alone.
That's your whole ad.
Yep.
Golden Ox Studio. That's it.
Yeah.
Leave me alone.
Go to goldenoxstudio.com and start talking. And we'll figure out the rest for you.
He's appealing to people like me. I'm like, I respect that. I respect that approach. He's so honest. I want to work with honest people. He's not fucking, hey, I'm all sunshine and real fucking fake. See, Jerry.
There's some, there's some other podcast approaches that people have, and I'm not going to name names or businesses, but they're like they're very corporate-y and like stale, and I want to be like the dirty punk rock version of those places.
Right, you're the crust punk.
Yeah.
Well, I remember when you were telling us about this idea of starting this studio, and it was like, yeah, dude, when you get that going, let's talk. And it was one of those things where it kind of forced me to be like, all right, well, we're doing a podcast and we're recording on this day at this time, and let's figure it out. And that's another thing too that this podcast has helped with for me personally. It's just like riffing and like making connections faster as in like a conversational setting. And I feel like I've heard it from a lot of our guests too, that they discover a lot of new material just in conversation. And I mean, I've thought about that before, but now as I'm in conversation with people, I'm a lot more conscious of it. Mm-hmm. Just knowing that this is like, I go into every conversation like, if I don't get a gold nugget out of this, then you're wasting my time.
I mean, 3/4 of my stand-up currently is stuff we've talked about on this podcast.
Yeah. I think I have a joke. I think I could tie like all of my, or at least for all of the episodes, I can tie a joke into somehow. I can find a connection between that.
Yeah.
Also, I want to thank to anybody who's joined the podcast. I mean, we've had, we started with Dave Flint, you got the Cleveland stalwarts, your John Armstrongs, your Liz Blanc, Mary Santora, Brett, Joe Graham, Dwayne Duke, Amber, who's now in Michigan,
Raj,
who's now in Arkansas. It's Raj, man. That dude moved to New York. He was like, I'm about to take this city by storm. And then COVID was like, Not if I do first. And
Laughing.
Yeah, we've learned so much from so many comedians. Greg
Yeah.
Stone, the like quick conversation him and I had was huge for me. Still, it's something I think about.
right, he had a very layered perspective on reality, and he's somebody that, I mean, you can tell, like, does research and like he never takes things on from like a surface value perspective, like, oh, this is what I saw, or this is what they said, and that means this, and that's final. Like, he's very open to changing his opinion, it seems like.
Absolutely. Yeah. I like how objective he is.
Because that
He's
was
like, I might be gay. I'll try it.
yeah.
I appreciate his like honesty.
Right. Right. It was yeah, the moment there was a dick in my face, I realized I wasn't gay, but I don't know, maybe I just haven't met that guy yet.
For someone at that level where he's been like past at Carol or at the Cellar, that kind of like that level, I would assume that's a level, right? So I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, usually I don't know how that works, but for someone of that get to that point and to be who he is still, that's great. The last thing I want to do, and I fear this from some of our guests, is that they are too cool for school. And I just want to avoid that as much as possible because I hate dealing with that shit.
Yeah. We've been fortunate. We haven't had a guest like that. So that's
right. And here's the thing. Everybody wants to talk about themselves. So, even if they still will open up about themselves and what they learned and the lumps that they took along the way. So, like, worst case scenario, I mean, I'm not on the podcast. Like, I don't want to make this podcast about me. Speaking of that, today's episode is brought to you by Water Cooler Comedy, my business.
Now it's everybody's business.
Yeah. But you know what I mean? Like, I want to make it about our guests because they have things that our listeners that you guys can learn and that I can learn too. Like, I'm never closed off from learning something new from somebody, even if I've heard the same message over and over again. Today's a different day. I'm going through a different experience. I can learn, I can attach that lesson to what I'm going through now, as a reminder or whatever.
Can you guys remind me to stop ear dropping how long I've been doing comedy to guests to assure them that I know what I'm talking about? I'm not self-aware enough to not do that, but I am self-aware enough to know I should stop fucking doing that.
Yeah, but you make a connection too. I mean, if it's relevant to the conversation, it doesn't.
So like back in 2012 when I wrote this joke, so it's like 8 years if you can do math in your head. So been doing this for a while, even though I haven't really said much of anything that funny on here. So what difference does it fucking make? It makes me sound like I've wasted my time for 8 years if I'm not that funny on my own fucking podcast. There's the F word.
There
F word left.
But that's the thing too, is there's no pressure on this, but even though it's a comedy podcast, it's more about comedy. And when you're talking about comedy, it's not always funny,
Yeah.
To me, comedy is more about making connections, whether it's cerebrally, like internally, or with other people.
Like connections where like you have like a cork board and you're like, it's conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of connections.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just what my synapses look like in my brain. That's what a QAnon brain looks like. It's just the cork. Their brains are made out of cork board, and it's just like little pieces of yarn being stuck to other unrelated things that are actually not even related.
Yeah, very porous.
Yeah, porous.
9/11 was an inside Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
And wait, Steve Jobs started Apple out of a garage, and there was a noose hanging in that NASCAR driver's garage. Do you think that was Steve Jobs?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just imagine the noose, but it's made out of nerd's rope.
In order to attract children
Yes.
into the pedophile ring.
Yeah.
Yes.
We haven't had an episode about QAnon yet. That'll be fun. We'll get
All
there.
the pedophiles have a ring and they put them together and it creates a a special.
One ring to rule them all.
You crossed the line.
What topics have we not done? Are you guys looking forward to?
Child molestation.
Okay, that's a good one.
No, that is one that's going to come up at some point. I mean, we've done 50 episodes. That's going to be. I've heard plenty of comics talk about that, both their own personal experience or just generally. Have we talked about rape?
Not yet. We've talked about new comics doing rape jokes on their first try.
Definitely.
Over and over again.
There was this guy that used to show up at Touch Supper Club way back when I started in 2012. And he came in, he would come in with a hoodie on, real dark. And then he would read off of, or no, he would say, he had a whole memorized thing. It was just a big monologue about rape. And then he would say it like he was reciting it off of a piece of paper. And then he would leave, and that would be it. And it would just be not funny, and haven't seen him since.
Good.
I'm back.
That's fun.
Prop comedy. That's what I'm looking forward to, is prop comedy.
Ooh, we should
haven't
talk
done
about that.
any prop artists.
We haven't.
I'm just kidding.
But here's the thing. If we play their clip, then we'd have to describe it while it's happening. Well, now that we're doing video podcast, that's another thing. But I don't know. For me, there's a lot. I mean, we haven't talked about abortion yet. We haven't talked about, we've talked about racism. We've talked about stereotypes. We haven't talked about inequality. I mean, there are different facets of each of these topics. And that's why, at the beginning we were like, are we going to run out of topics? But then no, because each comic has their own take on it that does a joke about it. So there's a million different ways to talk about one thing. Car accidents, like 9/11. We haven't had an episode about those.
We haven't spina bifida. We haven't.
Yeah.
Just threw that out there.
We just keep forgetting to do an episode on 9/11.
Yeah.
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 I'm like,
and that's the one thing they told us not to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Never forget. Once a day, I want you to think about 9/11.
Right. Think about what you did.
Never forget to do a podcast about 9/11.
We haven't done one about the Holocaust. We haven't done one about Islam. We haven't done one about
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many.
Definitely have to have a Jewish comic on for Holocaust. I just think we should.
Yeah.
No, I don't mean that as a joke. I mean, literally, I want someone's insight from being Jewish because I don't think that. Obviously, we could just have whoever on, but I'm saying I think it would be an even more in-depth conversation when you have a Jewish comic.
Kind of like our first episode, how we talked about transgender jokes. You and me, Steve.
Oh, right.
Anyone knows anything about being transgender?
Right. To be fair, we didn't have any trans comics in our comedy community to talk to about it anyway, so it's
We do now.
We do, yeah. She's very
Alexa.
funny. She's very funny. Oh my God.
Yeah.
So funny.
Yeah.
Who now?
I haven't seen her in a while, so I saw her. It was one of her first times doing it. And you could tell she was nervous. The content was there, but I mean, when you're new, when you do it the first few times, you're switching the mic from side to side. You're playing with the cord. You're not making eye contact. It sounds scripted because you're nervous, and we've all gone through that,
right?
But the content was there, and it was this is one of those people where if they keep getting up and doing it, it can be very funny.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I still have that habit of looking down. I naturally just look down at the floor, even if I'm in a typical conversation.
Yeah.
And sometimes I forget, you can't do that on stage.
No.
Immediately you're getting discredited by that body language.
Oh yeah, you lose the trust of, and that's the weird thing too, is you lose the trust of the audience if you give off that you're not confident, because then it's especially if you're going to talk about touchier things or be vulnerable, You know, the lack of confidence comes across to an audience, and they're like, well, we shouldn't listen to this person.
Lack of confidence ruins everything. Because the audience just knows just by intuition and their own.
I don't know. I think lack of confidence can still be made into comedy. I think that still can be funny as long as you're confident in your insecurities.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, I was just gonna say that. It was like the only way lack of confidence comes across as funny is if you're confident in your lack of confidence.
Yeah.
100%. There's a sweet spot too. You can't be too like overconfident. You know, I won't name anybody, but we've brought his name up a few times over the last couple of weeks and edited it out.
Bless your heart.
Yeah.
I want to save Jeremy some time, so I'm not going to go there.
We should clarify now that we're here, all of us sitting here. I don't actually edit the podcast. David edits the podcast.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I just record it.
I don't know why I keep because I know David's mentioned that numerous times.
It's fine. It's fine. We'll just tell people, because if the editing's bad, then it's, Jeremy, fucking asshole.
Yeah. No, totally.
That lazy. Golden Ox Studio's terrible.
No, you do a good job. I just don't want to take credit for work that isn't mine.
You can't laugh at that.
This podcast isn't for everybody. So if you don't think if you don't think there's a fit, that don't say yes. I don't take it personally. There are plenty of comedians out there that we can talk to.
Right.
It's not like, well, that was the last one. You know, there's so many options, so many good comics. That's another thing that I'm learning is every scene has you don't think about it, but it makes sense. You know, you go to a city like Indianapolis and it's like, oh, Joe Bates is there. Alex Price is there. Like there's, and then you go to Detroit and there's like Diego and Noah Chap and we're lucky too, because Cleveland is in such a pocket of comedy. Like we're so close to Detroit and Cincinnati and Pittsburgh and Columbus, and Indianapolis isn't even that far away. You know, we're halfway between New York and Chicago. There's so much potential for like really cool guests.
Right.
To pop through. And that's what I've been telling everybody that we've had on the show from New York. Like, if you're on your way to Chicago, stop in Cleveland, when things open back up, and we'll make sure to put you in touch with the right people to get on their shows, and, just give us enough notice. We'll talk to Pete at Funny Stop, give you a set. Like, I'm going to have a bedroom in my house opening up. So crash at my place. Like, let's make Cleveland a scene that people look forward to going to. Just because you don't like the idea that you don't have to be in one of the major markets now to be successful at comedy, that opens the door for us as a city. And people like Ramon are already like cultivating that with their shows. Bill is doing a great job putting Cleveland on the map as far as comedy,
Yeah.
So as long as there's like a banger show every night.
There was pre-pandemic,
right?
Like there was somewhere you can go 2-3 times a night for Monday through Thursday.
Yeah. Yep.
So I miss that.
It's going to be weird because we want to hit the ground running when audiences come back.
Right.
So if you have audiences coming back, there might be a little bit of a weird shift where the comics are rusty, but the audiences are hungry, and we don't want to miss the alignment.
Right.
We want to be sharp when the audiences are still hungry, because I don't think that'll fade away right away, but also I think
they'll be so hungry for entertainment that even with our rustiness, they're going to be very forgiving.
The best thing to do is to be upfront about it. Be like, we haven't done this in a long time. So it's like, I think that they will definitely understand, because everybody's gone. Oh, and it's super relatable. So, I mean, if you do have some good material about the pandemic, everybody's going to love it. Right. Just don't go fucking hack about it, I feel like the whole landscape's going to be completely changed, though. All those shows are going to fall by the wayside. Some might stay. I hope East End comes back, if anything.
There's a lot of spaces, too, that are open that don't have anybody at them. So, and there's like... a lot of chefs are doing pop-ups, like going to say like Mayhall's or something and doing like a pop-up where they have a limited menu of like 6 items and you go and pick up the food. What if there was a comedy show going on in the other room at the same time? You know what I mean? Like teaming up with other people that are freelancing, that are out of their line of work, essentially, like doing these new things. All right, let's talk about some of these episodes.
Sure.
Let's talk about some of these episodes. We touched on a little bit the first episode, which is the transgender one, and we talked about it a little bit last night. You made a couple good points in this episode that I really enjoyed. Let me pull up my document.
Document?
The document.
I've never heard it pronounced like that.
Is it document?
No, you were right.
Document. Yeah.
Document.
Document. Of course, we were like, hey, we don't know what we're doing. Let's talk about transgender. And I mean, all the topics we could just dive in on. I don't know why we made it this one. I don't know what was going through my head, but here we are. Yeah. And a couple of the things that stood out to me were the idea that it's okay to make yourself the butt of the joke. Like, you can talk about the topic, but if you make yourself the butt of the joke, it makes it okay.
Do you mean to knock your camera?
No.
There we go.
Were you looking at my dick?
Yeah.
Yeah, you were crotch shotting us, and it was very uncomfortable. Yeah. Hey, man, you don't work for the New Yorker. It's not.
So making yourself the butt of the joke, because we talked about the Dave Chappelle special where he talked about the T in the LGBTQ. And
T's, they don't like me.
Yeah.
That almost sounded big. It sounded like he says the T's. It almost sounded worse than saying trans people.
But that's very Chappelle.
Yeah.
You know, and he got away with it because he made the joke about himself. The whole joke was about how he misunderstood it.
Yeah, that's good.
So that's why it worked. You can make and he made being closed-minded the butt of the joke. So he not only did he make himself the butt of the joke, but he made his perception of it the butt of the joke. So you can talk about that, you know, and somebody's actions can always can be the butt of a joke because they made the conscious choice. Like, you weren't born predisposed to take that action. You made that action. You took that action through conscious choice. And so that can always be looked at as being funny.
Such a weird, I always think it's really strange that, like, people have this strange standard of comedians when we're not politicians, we're not pastors, we're not we're not social leaders. So why do we have to live up to this standard of, like, you know, make sure you say it properly or make sure you're not offending anybody? It's like, you're in a fucking comedy club. Like, somebody's going to be offended about something somewhere along the way, and you do the best job you can to not piss everybody off in the room. But at the end of the day, your job is to just say things that elicit laughter. And if that's what you're going for and humbly going for, then I don't really see where you can go wrong. Now discuss.
Right. There's going to be some missteps along the way, sure. But if the goal is to bring joy, you know, like, that also can help when you're writing the bit. Because if you have the thought, is this too much? You've given yourself the subconscious message that maybe rework it a little bit. You can still say the same thing, but maybe in a different way.
There's so many ways you can make people laugh. You don't need to make it hard for yourself by trying. Like, obviously, you're trying to make something funny out of something that is difficult to make funny, and that's fine. But, like, there's so many possibilities that sometimes you don't need to, like, just focus on eliciting as much laughter as possible. Everything else, I don't know. I hope I'm making sense. I don't.
Right. Well, if you're shocking some of the audience, like, you're missing out on laughs. So rework the joke.
So many things you can do that are safe and really good. And I don't mean like being safe is like, but it's like things that are just intrinsically safe.
Right. You got to find that sweet spot of being safe and edgy at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, often we go back to Steve's point of, like, being self-aware. You may not even have there's certain things that I know that I can't get away with saying because I just don't have the personality to say those things. Yeah. Where, you know, somebody like, you know, for the sake of argument, like Jimmy Graham, can say certain offensive things that are funny to people because he has the personality to pull that off.
Yeah.
Not only does he reiterate over and over again that he's a scumbag, he shows it. And if you're offended by that, he's been telling you who he is this whole time.
Yeah.
So that's on you at this point.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
that's like we only serve meat here. We only serve meat here. And then somebody who's a vegan takes a bite. And he's like, this is meat. It's like, we've been telling you that.
right.
Yeah.
That's a great. It's a great.
We're not hiding it.
Yeah.
Steve, you made the point too. Don't make comedy a tragedy for somebody. And in this, the context was, people who trans people are going through a lot. They've gone through a lot as a kid and
high suicide rates.
Right. Getting to the point where they're confident enough in who they are to make the transition. And then for somebody to get on stage and belittle that it's unacceptable.
Yeah. They're not doing it for the negative attention that they get.
Right. The goal is to make people laugh. If that person were in the room, would they be laughing right now? Is a good standard to go by.
People really do relive trauma, and people don't understand how that works. And so you got to be mindful of that.
Ooh, the episode with Hannah, the one that I'm editing right now, she talks about that. She didn't used to joke about her childhood because it was still, it still hurt. But then when she started joking about it, then it was like, oh, this is funny, and I'm using this as a mechanism to move on, essentially.
Yeah.
So when you're ready.
A lot of sensitivities are frivolous, but a good handful of them are totally legitimate. So.
Sure. Yeah, tragedy plus time equals comedy, and it's not up to you to dictate what that time is for other people, for people in the room. So it's up to you to, as a comic, to take what you've learned in your previous performances, to take your own sensibilities and to make it as palatable for as many people as possible.
Yeah, entertainment equals material times comedy squared.
Yeah, that's actually real. Well, there's a kid.
Make sure you carry the one though.
Yeah. Oh, you have to. Otherwise, a lot of people make that mistake. They don't carry the one.
No.
All of a sudden it's.
I think that if you have to ask yourself, is this offensive? You've already answered your own question.
Yeah.
Not always. No, I'm not going to say not always, but most of the time, if you think to yourself, is this going to be offensive to somebody?
I think it's also important to ask the question, but then also figure out the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've had to do that with jokes where I'm like, well, no, I'm not really offending anybody. Yeah, it's a topic that seems like I'm hitting a nerve, but really the joke itself, there's the expense of the joke isn't on that type of person or that topic or whatever. It's just like, also, but then it's like, if it's not about that, you almost have the opportunity to rework it without that in it to save yourself some, questionability about it.
Also ask yourself, what is your intent with this joke?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That's the point. That's everything.
I've had a lot of jokes where it's wordplay based, but it'll be about trans people or something. And then people will be like, oh my God. And it's like, no, I literally that's facilitating wordplay. It literally is not at the expense of whatever the joke is about. Cause it's not always about trans people. I just use that as the most extreme example. When I do the joke about Caitlyn Jenner, the one about irreconcilable similarities, where people will think, oh, are you implying that a woman and a woman can't irreconcilably be in love? And it's like, well, no, Kris Jenner is straight. Or at least I assume she is.
Yeah.
And because, Caitlyn is trans doesn't mean because if they're still married, then she is still a straight, sexually male person. You can't dispute that.
Right.
Gender-wise, female, but
and isn't your joke is saying that in just 6 words, It's
a wordplay. It's literally not about making fun of trans people.
Right.
Please just fucking laugh at the fucking joke.
Yeah. Literally, you are saying Caitlyn Jenner and Kris Jenner are getting a divorce because Kris Jenner doesn't like women.
Yeah, and the other
that's
joke,
literally what you're saying.
yeah, and then the other joke is just about people having a hard time with adjusting to pronouns. That's all that is about. It's not about keeping up with the pronouns. It's just people have a hard time with that, and that's all that's about. So,
and never do you make Caitlin the butt of the joke.
Right.
You know, that's not the point of it. I don't have any jokes about that. Like I said in this episode that I would do a joke, that I would write a joke about it. And like, I thought maybe that was going to be our thing. Like at the end of the episode, it's like, okay, now that we've learned all these things, let's come back next week and have a joke for this. And that never really took off. I mean, if you guys want to do that could be fun. But so the only thing I could think of was that before the pandemic, I was at a conference. I spoke at a conference, and there's like the networking portion, right? And I met this like really tall woman. And when I asked her, like, we're doing small talk, when I asked her what she did for a living, she was like, "Oh, I'm in transition," which I thought was a weird way to answer that question, right? So, but like, I'm supportive, you know. I want to be a supportive dude. So I was like, you know, congratulations, that's awesome. And then she gave me this look, and I was like, am I not supposed to answer that way? So I was like, oh, I'll inflate her ego. And I was like, you look amazing. And then she was like, well, thanks. If you know anyone who's hiring, then give them my card. And that is when I realized that in transition also means unemployed.
yeah.
And that when this stranger told me that she had just gotten fired, my response was, congratulations. Like, the joke isn't great, but it's about my perception of it, of the situation more than anything. Like, man, I feel like a woman. The initial pitched version title of the song was "I Feel Like a Woman, Man."
Oh yeah.
All right. Dave Flint, his episode about curse words. Same thing. It's just like, it's the perception of the word. When everybody hears a word, everybody has a different reaction to what that word is based off of their experience with the word. And what he said that I really liked in that episode is, if you're offended by words, there's something internal you got to work out. You shouldn't be at a comedy show. You should be at a therapist. And it's a good point.
It's a great point.
But why did he get so mad when I called him the N-word?
And then you had a good question, Steve, and I think we can talk about this for a second. Are words like drugs make them legal and they lose their power?
Oh, yeah. Well, not make them legal, make them... yeah, there's that too, but it's more or less like the availability of something and the flooding the market with something, or everything loses its sort of its push. And it's, But I mean, that takes time too, though. You can't do it all at once, but
no,
you can't oversaturate the market.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, if everybody's saying it. And I remember we talked about this a little bit too. The word cunt, like, used to have so much punch to it. But once Game of Thrones came out, it was fine. Or you could just say it in a British accent, and because they use that all the time over there.
Mine is gender neutral, so I just use it all the time. I call dudes cunt more than I do women.
Yeah. Right.
I like it. It makes me feel good when I say it. That's why I like calling dudes cunts. And they get like a little bit weirded out by it. It's like calling like a racist the N-word. They're like, why'd you call me that? And then it's like, well...
How do you feel? How do you feel about it?
If you get offended by it, imagine what people that have actually been, you know...
Right. I love using cunty.
Yeah.
I like the adjective version of it. You know, you're being cunty. Stop being so cunty. Another thing too, for example, the N-word, that was a word born out of hate. And that's why it's unacceptable, because there's really no, and the excuse is like, well, they say it. And it's like, well, yeah, they're taking power over that word that was used to demean, and you know. I
think it's fair to say that it's on them to go ahead and take that word and dilute its meaning.
Right.
Because I don't think white people should be doing that per se.
No.
There will be a point in time, I guarantee it, when, well, assuming that progress continues, that word won't have its meaning anymore. It will still be historically, relevant, but
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I'd like to hop into a time machine and see what impact that word has in 200 years. And that's the thing is like words, we made words so we can change words. We can change the meaning of words. We can change the definition of words. And
Right.
I mean, everything that we see is a shared not shared consciousness. What's it called? Intersubjective reality.
Yeah.
That we have, where like we agree on these things. This like $1 bill can get you this many things, and this word means this, and this this law means this, and we all agree on that. They're all made up things. They're all made up concepts that we all agree on, and that's why our society works.
The only way a word can really lose it, like the N-word or something, is when we're a further homogenized society, and we're also a further where there's virtually no inequality.
Right.
Like net zero inequality.
Right.
And there's an understanding and an educational level that everybody has where they all understand that like racism is silly and it doesn't hold any meaning anymore. We're talking like at least 100 years from now.
Oh, for sure.
Which is so sad. We're going to Mars, but we still can't solve our problems here. We need to terraform Earth first, like Neil deGrasse Tyson says.
Yeah. Words won't matter then. We'll just speak in binary.
Yeah.
The third episode, John Armstrong, relationships. I did this topic because it's overdone. Relationships are an overdone topic, but everyone relates to it. Everyone's had a relationship or knows someone who's had a relationship. Yeah. And what I learned from this episode was that the most important relationship a comedian can have is with the audience. That was like this episode to me was like groundbreaking. I feel like I ascended to a different level of comedian listening to John talk about you have to build trust when you're on stage. You have to. It's the same as dating a woman. Is you have to build trust. You have to they have to know that you're going to take them and get them home safely.
Yeah, and you got to quickly establish who you are, especially in the first 30 seconds is the most crucial of time, because that's the time you have to establish who you are and what they're in store for the next however much time. Right. So,
you have to have empathy. You have to, make sure your stories are relatable on some level. That wasn't something I thought about before this episode, is that's the most important relationship right then and there when you're on stage. It's with the audience.
This is all what's tough for people that are right-wing extremists right now, or at least people that are, that culture of insensitivity that we have where everybody's like, who cares? Fuck your feelings. And it's like, wow, you have like literally no emotional intelligence at all.
Yeah. You can't laugh at that.
You Can't Laugh at That is brought to you by Water Cooler Comedy. Now, for too long, we've been asking the question, should work be focused on work or fun? But Mark Twain once said that work and play are two words used to describe the same thing under different circumstances. So my point is that we're asking the wrong question. Instead of asking, should work be work or fun, the question should be, how can we make work fun? Whether it's a keynote speech, a half-day workshop, a 90-day consulting program, a customized corporate comedy experience for you and your team as you try to figure out how to reboard, how to get back to work after working virtually for a year. Why humor in the workplace? Well, studies have shown that humor builds resilience. It allows us to adapt to problems more quickly, more creatively, and more It allows us to adapt to problems more quickly, more creatively, and more I can't say collaboratively. It allows us to adapt to not being able to say collaboratively correctly. Because not only does laughter make us feel better, it makes us work better too. So why not make work the time and place to laugh? Check out watercoolercomedy.org.
You can't laugh at that.
All right. That takes us to the Donald Trump episode with Blake Hammond.
Segways, baby, segways.
Oh, that episode was very fun. Steve, were you part? I don't think you were part of that one.
No, I wasn't, because I remember thinking, no, I wish I could have, because it was about Donald Trump, I guess, but I don't know.
It was a fun conversation.
I honestly thought you were on that episode.
I don't think I was.
I co-hosted it and then I forgot. No, I'm such a
his joke. Well, he had a joke. It wasn't about Donald Trump. It was that joke about how half of the people he worked with support Donald Trump and half the people support are against Donald Trump. And his motorcade came through town, and those people went outside of his workplace, the restaurant, I think it was. And the people who loved Donald Trump were cheering, and the people who didn't were booing. And, and then he realized it was a funeral procession.
That's right.
And then he told the joke from the perspective of the people in the limo in the funeral procession. Like, what would it look like? You're just driving by, these people are cheering, and these other people are booing it. Like, so it was a very unaffiliated joke, essentially.
I would just be relieved to have the break from grieving, to be confused about something else for a moment.
Yeah.
Like, what was that all about? Like, those people protesting our funeral? I'm on their side of the argument. I wish this person wasn't dead either.
Right. But I love the support that we're getting. Those people. And what I learned is you can joke about politics without being political, especially if you have a room that's divided. And I think that's a really good point.
People get too sensitive even if you're not political and you bring it up, because all my jokes were at the expense of Trump. But the problem, you notice I'd never gone, hey guys, what's up with this president? He's the worst, blah, blah, blah. No, I would just get to the damn joke, and I would do like 4 or 5 of them. And they were all get to the point, and they were all good. But the thing is, they just are still they are leaning left of the middle of.
He's their Muhammad.
Yeah.
You can't joke about him, or else we're gonna.
You just can't draw tiny hands.
Yeah.
You can draw him though.
Right. Make sure his hands are to scale.
You crossed the line.
Any episodes you guys want to talk about?
We could talk about Mary's episode. That was a really good one.
Yeah, it was.
What was that topic? Alcohol?
Being
an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Steve, what would have been some of your takes about being an alcoholic?
I don't know.
Because I think you're still sober like I am, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't drink. I never had an enormous problem with alcohol. I did with comedy because it was free. Whenever it was free, it was a problem. But generally, I wasn't too frequent of a drinker, and I didn't always get too drunk, but I had my moments. But it was still enough for me to just want to quit, because I think it's just healthier not to drink, because why rely on that? Once it had positive results, it had that reinforcement that I didn't need it.
I love that episode, but I was a little concerned about it after we had recorded it, that we had not made it clear of the fact that you don't drink anymore as an alcoholic doesn't mean your problems are all already are just automatically solved. Like the path to going downward is linear, but the path back up is not. And that, just because you quit drinking is only the start of the battle of getting yourself to a place of happiness, or at least, in my opinion, where I'm at is a place where your depression is manageable. And, I think that, I don't know if we had hit on that point during that episode. I feel like it came across. We hadn't explicitly said it.
You said it specifically.
Did I?
Yeah, because you didn't say it during the episode, but you sent me a clip and I edited it in.
Oh, look at you.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's a good point. You know, it's once you get that vice out of the way, what's next? You know, that's not the end all be all. That's just like, oh, you know, that let's say you have a bathroom that the plumbing is wrecked and, you know, it hasn't been remodeled in forever. Like you got rid of the black mold. Cool. That's one thing. Now you have now you can go into that room and not inhale toxic fumes. Like you still have to fix the bathroom.
Right.
Yeah.
That wasn't a good analogy, but you know what I mean.
It wasn't too far of a stretch though.
Yeah. It's an inhibitor, you know.
We did talk about things like what we used that wasn't alcohol that was just as harmful to fill the void of alcohol. And for me, it's work and lack of sleep gives me that still euphoric feeling of alcohol without drinking. Mm-hmm. So there's still, even though you're not drinking, there's still ways to fill that void with harmful things other than, you know, the thing that everyone yells at you for.
Right.
So.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's like, yeah, you got to replace it with something better, better for you. It's like, you know, I wrote a joke. It's a great premise, but the punchline stinks. You can't just take out the punchline and leave the setup, you know?
Right.
You need something better to replace it with.
Yeah.
Mary is somebody that uses comedy to cope very quickly. Because when she was going through getting sober, she was joking about it. Like even before she decided to get sober, she was joking about her alcoholism and how it was stopping her. So it was like she had that self-awareness that when she finally made the decision, and this is a question that I would have loved to ask her, is like, was joking about it something that helped move you in that direction of getting sober? Another episode we haven't done is drug addiction. So that's another, and like heroin and like overdose. Damn, dude, we have so many fucking topics we need to hit.
You can see why alcoholism is a problem, because I still think about it. I'm like, I would love to be drunk right now. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
But also it's not strong enough for me to be like, well, I'm going to go get drunk.
Yeah.
But it also just didn't feel good anymore. Where I was like,
it gets less and less for me as time goes on, but there's still this moment. There's these moments where you're just like, "Fuck it, I'm going to buy a bottle of Jim Beam or Old Crow or whatever it is,
30 rack
in a fucking 8-ball, and I'm gonna burn this motherfucker to the ground. Like this is what's gonna happen."
Yeah. One of the things that I really enjoyed with this episode too, she talked about like making a list. Just writing down as many things you can think about something. So she had the premise of what are all the things you can do when you're not hungover, and then she made a list and then wrote a joke about like you can get McDonald's breakfast and go to the bank before noon, and that's like it's simple, but it's one way to find the funny in a situation.
Yeah,
just sit down and it's like, what's one thing I can do if I didn't do this, and then just make a list of as many as you can.
All right.
Do you ever write jokes in list form or like figure out what a punchline is by just writing, like making a list, following a premise?
I do no. Generally, no.
Same.
Are you talking about like writing a premise and then writing out all the possibilities?
Yeah.
It just doesn't, that's just not the flow chart for me.
Yeah.
Although I have done that, I generally don't.
Yeah, same.
It's a good thing to do. I say it's a good idea.
Yeah.
But usually it's like working backwards. The joke is, for me, everything's short form. So it's not like I'm not trying to find the end. I'm trying to find the beginning I find the end first. Or
that's a good
technique. I don't know, but I work backwards a lot. That's how rappers work. They sound clever because they wrote the ending rhyme first and then figured out how to start it. So then when you get to the ending, you're like, wow, how did he come up with that really cool? No, you work backwards.
Right. And that's a good way too to figure out how to achieve a goal, is start from the goal and work backwards too. Yeah. Just like starting from the punchline and working back to the setup.
How could I get there? What do I need to do to get to this to be the ending?
Yeah. And it's easier to think, how would I get from there to where I am now?
You have to do that with wordplay.
Yeah.
Because you can't do it the other way.
Yeah.
I mean, you can, but it'd be a coincidence and you'd have to be like really smart to figure that. I don't know. You get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. You'd be making something up out of raw materials versus having the funny part first and then having to build a joke around it to make it work. Yeah. Have a payoff.
Mary's very good at writing comedy without making it feeling forced into being comedy. Where, this is something we've talked about in the past where the last episode we recorded, you guys were talking about how you can't force comedy or you can't force yourself into writing comedy if you're not inspired. And that was helpful to me because I'm like, I keep kicking myself for not having written enough in the last, couple of months when, I really haven't been inspired to write anything.
Yeah.
So but what's the breaking point? Like, you can't always go 2 months waiting on the comedy to come to you. So how do you break yourself out of that rhythm of, how do you force yourself into finding inspiration?
You just write. Don't write to write jokes. Just write. Just write out your thoughts.
That's a great way of just getting to where you want. Getting to a place where you can write a joke about something. It's like you're simulating what I would do normally, which is go out and experience the world and find a joke in some situation or something that comes across my mind based on stimuli that have inspired me. But if you sit down and you create that environment artificially, you can do the same thing.
Right.
So
you can create that creativity.
Absolutely.
Even if you don't feel creative, even if it's the last thing you want to do, if you just sit down and write for 5 minutes, just what stream of consciousness, doesn't matter. There's no stakes.
You know what I think is a good idea? One thing I've tried doing is when I was having trouble having writer's block a couple years ago or so, here and there, I would go to the Lakewood Library and go and look for books, fiction or nonfiction, mostly nonfiction, and look up interesting topics, things that you know nothing about. And then go and read a bunch. And then all of a sudden you're in this other world and all these fresh ideas come to mind. And then, so you do a lot of reading and then your brain's primed to do a lot of writing. And
actually, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Just breaking, even the simple act of breaking up a routine can inject that creativity.
Yeah, right mix away. Mix it up because that also creates more dopamine, I would assume. I would bet I'm not like a neuroscientist, but I would assume that, going out and changing up your environment is going to introduce more dopamine or whatever the chemical is.
It is dopamine. It is dopamine because it's like the kick of discovering something new. That feeling is dopamine.
Right. And that I think helps. So if you can create an environment in your brain where there's dopamine coming in, that's a good place to, I think that's why I think people like to smoke weed before they write, because they think it helps them be creative, but it's really just your happiness and your dopamine rush that's kind of helping your brain think creatively. Because I think the dopamine helps put your brain into a state of play and fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you figure out, when you get a joke, like when your audience gets a joke and they laugh, that's dopamine. Yeah. So when you're able to find a way to release that by just doing something simple to discover something new, and you're creating that same state in your mind that's in their mind when they get your joke. Yeah. So you're like putting yourself on that level. So that like when you sit down and start writing from that place, you've connected with the audience, the future hypothetical audience when they are laughing at your joke. That's
create a fertile environment for creativity.
Right.
So smoke weed and go to the library. I got it. You guys,
that's it.
Hey,
that's
you guys
it. Do drugs.
Hey, you guys got any advice where I don't look like a fucking nerd?
Go to a place that you don't, break up your routine. That's the best thing you can do.
Mm-hmm. And that's to anybody, man. If you're feeling in a funk, take a different way home. Listen to a new podcast. Like,
Yeah.
Just simple. Watch a comedy special that you haven't watched before, or like listen to a comedian you haven't listened to before, and then think about like how what they're saying applies to your life. I mean, there are any number of ways to do it. Everybody does it differently.
I need to watch more stand-up.
Yeah.
I mean, I would get sick of it just from doing comedy because you see all these comics do it.
I listen to stand-up when I cook dinner.
That's a good idea.
That's how I figure out who I want to get on the podcast.
You can't laugh at that.
One more. Steve, any episodes stand out for you?
I think we touched some of these, but Bruton and Racism and then Being Christian with Zach Wyckoff.
Ooh, that was a good one. Ooh, that's a good segue from the Bible to back to Zach.
Yeah, back to Zach Attack.
That was a fun episode. I was worried I was going to have to divide it into 2 episodes because we like just kept talking. It was like the conversation just flowed.
I complimented him a lot because of how much I hate Christian comics, but he has an edge to him and he's actually funny. Yeah. And I think all the Christian comedians should be like him, or at least people. I don't know. I forget exactly how he really presents himself, but I don't think he thinks that he's a practicing Christian, but he's also just a comedian. He doesn't just do the church circuit per se, or whatever you want to call it.
He's a comedian who just so happens to be Christian, which is what the
He's so edgy. He is like the Louis C.K. of Christian comedy. So edgy to like. I wonder how edgy he sounds to churchgoers.
He talked about it a little bit, but
because he's just legitimately just regular funny, and by regular funny, I just mean like he's not a regular comedian type edgy. Although he is a little, I mean, he's just very funny though.
Yeah.
Just generally speaking. Yeah.
He said, the quote was, "I always wanted to be a comedian who's Christian and not a Christian comedian." And there's a big difference.
Yep. That's good. That's a good take.
Right. Well, and his whole thing is you should ask questions. People who don't ask, like we were talking about earlier, you should ask questions. The questions make sense. I understand why you have questions, and that's where he finds the comedy in the questions about it.
Yeah.
In playing devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Satan's advocate.
Lucifer's advocate.
The devil.
The devil.
The devil.
Another thing that he said too was he was talking about hacky Christian comedy. He said, if God made everything, that means he made art. He made comedy. He made stuff for us to appreciate. So why wouldn't we want to make stuff that is also good?
That's why I so badly wanted to be on that episode, because I think that if we're created in God's image, then God must really hate himself too.
Yeah.
There's so much of that. I love that episode because there's so much of it. I mean, being raised in a very like Christian family, and it seemed to me like he was raised in a very similar Christian family that I was, where it was like this like Southern Baptist charismatic Christian, where some of them speak in tongues and stuff like that. And so there's so much of that episode I loved because I related so much to it. Now I am the other side of that coin, where I am like I'm no longer Christian, who was raised to be Christian. So there was similarities between the way he grew up and I grew up, and I've loved his take of him still being a believer.
Dwayne Duke, his episode about strip clubs, we kind of already talked about it, but he said something that's really struck me. Or we talked about something that really struck me, is saying the same thing over and over again using different words. Those are all punchlines. Like, so yeah, I thought that was really interesting, and that's helped me write jokes. It's like, I can't figure out a punchline. Oh, just say the obvious thing in a different way, and now you have a punchline.
Yeah.
That's like a comedy hack.
Without being hacky.
Yep.
It's true, though. I mean, it's such a great way to get the most out of any joke you're writing, is to say the same thing or the same idea in different ways each time. It's such a brilliant take on how to write.
The first episode we did in the quarantine was about our biggest bombs.
Oh, yeah.
And getting comfortable with that. That was Steve's first episode in bed.
Laugh it up, fuzzball.
Oh, shit. Guys, we were retweeted by Mark Maron in episode 12.
Was that a year ago
I wish we
today?
would have done his episode much later on.
Oh, right. Yeah. Who knew?
Man.
Who knew that that special was going to be so fortuitous? You know what? It doesn't really get a whole lot of. Remember, Bill
Hold
Burr.
on. Fortuitous?
Oh, yeah, you're right. Hold on. pause for editing.
Hold on. Let's get some room tone.
We went a couple weeks in April and May without doing new episodes because my ass got COVID.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And we did a live special. Do you guys remember our live special? Get COVID out of your system.
Yeah. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, that was fun.
It was a rotating cast of characters.
And it's funny because I initially booked 25 comics and we ended up with 19 comics, finding 19 things that are funny about COVID-19. So it worked.
Yes.
It works. See, sometimes when things don't go as planned, it works out in your favor.
Does anybody remember that Bill Burr bit about him saying that there needs to be a plague?
Yeah.
Not
No
good
one's
enough.
talked about that.
Yeah, I
called
actually-
this-
I meant like a real plague, though. I want there to be a plague that actually just gets rid of the people that don't want to wear masks. Because imagine how nice that would be for us. I mean, obviously, I don't want anybody to die, but if it has to be somebody, it's going to have to be the people that deserve it the most.
Right.
So you purge those. That's how you purge the voter rolls.
Yeah. Well, it's just the idea too that like we need a plague. We needed something to unite people, and it didn't work.
Yeah.
Right. We were
That's
already
true. You
divided.
were
That's
saying
the
that-
problem.
David, you were saying that in the beginning of the pandemic, like this is going to bring us all together. And I was like, I don't know, man.
Oh, is there any of these masks?
It's like,
That's
no, this
why I
is
love-
the alien thing.
That's
This
why
is
I
the
love you
thing.
so much. You're so optimistic and you believe so much in so many people. And you're like, this is going to be the thing that's going to bring us all closer together.
Kumbaya, my lord.
Now you should just roll footage of January 6th over Steve singing Kumbaya.
Yeah. Murder with AJ DeCosimo.
Oh, yeah, that's when you shared your cousin's story for the first time.
Yeah.
That's an intense story.
Yeah, man. It's okay to come up with an awful joke and not perform it right away if you're not ready. Take some time, hone your craft, and try rewriting it as you build your skill set.
Yes. I don't throw things away.
Right. Right. And that's something that we've brought up since that episode. Like, if you're not ready to tell the joke, just put it away until you are.
Right.
And that's a concept that we've brought up many times since then. Tim Cornette.
Right.
Whether you're at Ford's Theater or on the grassy knoll, make sure that you rate and share this podcast with your friends.
That's so funny.
Antonio Aguilar, loneliness. We find humor in the fact that we overthink so much to avoid loneliness, but overthinking as a comic when the audience doesn't laugh can make you feel lonely in a room full of people. Ooh.
Deep.
Ay, 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 ay.
Deep
Mike
words.
Head. Dick pics. Let's see.
Dick pics can be lonely.
Yep. Especially when you're sending them to yourself. Next, Matt Levy.
Cancer. Hilarious. Moving on.
Moving on. Ooh, remember, no matter how many times you've told a joke, tell it with the excitement that you had when you told it the first time, because it's the audience's first time hearing it.
We've had some really great guests. I'm just impressed that we have a great, and whoever picked out the thumbnails did a really good job getting all their best photos on there. It really sells it. I like it.
Yeah, it makes it look official, right?
It's
Very,
David.
yeah, we had a lot of great comedians on. It's weird seeing them out of their element. So you don't really see it when we're face to face, but it's like when you see all these pictures of them doing comedy, it's like, oh yeah, no, we're all legitimate comedians. It's
Yeah,
cool.
they do the sport. Yeah. Not only is it Paige Polesnak, not only is it okay to be vulnerable, it's therapeutic and it creates connections with people in the audience who are afraid of vulnerability.
Right.
That's why people could come up to you and be like, I saw myself in that bit. Like they're so excited that somebody went through something similar and has the balls to talk about it. Ricky Glore coming out as anything other than gay. There's nothing new under the sun. As the Bare Naked Ladies once said, it's all been done. Just give it your unique perspective and you can add an original take to make any hack topic seem fresh. Boom. Roasted. Travis Irvine. Stick to comedy. We all want the same things. We all just have different ideas for how to get it. Don't perform for the audience you wish you had. Connect with the one that you do.
It's beautiful.
Yes. Jasmine, getting an STD.
Her only advice is wear a rubber.
Yeah. Wear a condom. Next. We don't need another Kevin Hart or Jerry Seinfeld. We need you. Don't imitate what you saw or you think is funny. Just be you.
Ooh, that's good. I like that.
Yeah. Jacob Barr. Be really mean to your audience.
I love Jacob Barr.
Yeah. If you're looking for a source of funny material, think about the weird, inauthentic things you did when you started worrying about fitting in. Ooh, that's good.
That
so
is
thinking
really
back to your childhood and like, what are the awkward things that you did in order to be not awkward? Gabe Kia. Getting arrested.
You want to close it out there?
Yeah. Well, we've done it. We've reached episode 50, and for that, we thank you, the listener, you, the viewer, you, the patron, you, the comedian, you, the special guest, and you, Jeremy and Steve. Because together we have learned that no matter how offensive, taboo, touchy, hack, mundane, or blue
Overplayed.
it may be, let's all say it at the same time. You can laugh at that. Special thanks to Golden Ox Studio. You can find Golden Ox Studio for all your podcasting needs at goldenoxstudio.com. Hit up Jeremy. He is fantastic to work with, professional. He makes podcasting easy. And if you've been kicking the tires on starting your own podcast, definitely give Golden Ox Studio a look.
If you'd like to weigh in on today's topic, follow us on Twitter at You Can't Laugh Pod, or like us on Facebook at You Can't Laugh at That, and tell us how you did laugh at today's topic or how you didn't. This is all about the conversation, is what I'm saying. All right. Bye.